Hi, this is Biosci 101, and we are talking about conferences because the AIM conference is next week. So a little bit of background on conferences, and give me a thumbs up so I know you can see the screen because sometimes that doesn't work. So thank you, appreciate it. Awesome. Okay, so one of my favorite analogies for science is that it's like that party game where in the old days when people gathered, but we could still do this on the internet. So it's like that party game where somebody starts a story and then the next person adds to it, the next person adds to it, and the next person adds to it, and then it goes totally off the rails. And gets super creative. Science is like that because we're all writing the story of what reality is, what can be done to cure diseases. We're all writing it together and we're all taking off a little chunk of it and going, let me look over here. Let me study this part of the whole huge world that exists for science to study. So although scientists often are introverts, it's a reality, at least at this point in history. We still need to communicate with each other constantly, and it's a group endeavor, it's a group effort. And so there's sort of three general ways that this communication happens, aside from the, well, Slack channels, which is Slack is kind of where a lot of scientists live right now. So aside from the usual, Slack, Twitter, social media, talking to each other actually, with words, one-on-one. But bigger organized ways are the following three ways. So one is posters. At conferences, any data that's fresh and new, but still kind of not fully cooked, the sub-story really isn't finished yet, will be presented on a poster. It's the quickest, easiest way to get your info out there and get feedback. And so at conferences, going to poster sessions is very fun because you get very new, the latest and the greatest, what's cooking, what's happening. And also the person stands there at the poster at a certain time and then you can talk to them. And literally, physically, we would make big posters. Now they have electronic posters a lot of the time, but the idea is here's all my info and let me walk you through it. Then there's all manner of talks at conferences, in different scenarios, but they can be a 15-minute talk. There's even 3-minute flash talks. They can be an hour long, usually no more than an hour. So the longer the talk, the more important you are. This is the idea. The more you have to say, like if you're a scientist who's done this for 40 years, you give a keynote speech at a conference to 10,000 people, you get to talk for an hour because you have a lot to say. If you're brand new, maybe, you're lucky to get a talk at a conference. I love talks from the perspective of learning about things. You get so much info. And now that everything's online, there's a lot of free talks. Like at Cal, they, at most places, they have a talk a day from other scientists from other parts of the world. They used to fly them in. Now, and those are open to the public, but you had to go to Cal. Now those are probably online if they're still happening. But in general, there's just a lot of free online science right now, more than there used to be because we weren't recording things before. The thing about a talk, I didn't include this, but I should have. Let me tell you now, when somebody's giving a talk, there's a bizarre sort of thing that, a line that we walk, that info, like you can take notes. You kind of maybe can take photos of them while they're talking. People don't like that. You cannot video or record them. In the old days, I don't know what we're doing now. The idea was, it was like they were talking to you, but they don't want to go on record. We used to have these sort of gatherings at a conference. It's like, I'm telling you, if you're here, don't hold me to it. So I don't know what's going on now since everything's on video. It's an interesting dilemma. But the idea is when it's really fully cooked, like when I know my results, when I've got my data, when I've analyzed it correctly, when I've checked and made sure and done all the controls that I need to do. Controls are how we check research. We'll talk more about it later in the semester. Basically, when I'm pretty sure of something, then I put it out as a paper. So that's why a talk is still like, I'm just telling you some stuff. Don't hold me to it. I might change my mind tomorrow. A paper is, no, this is what it is. I am giving you my results. I am giving you my interpretation of it. And there's generally peer review. And papers are written in scientific language, which is very dry, very fact-filled. It's very dense. And it's considered a report of the results. And papers are awesome. If you're in science, you read papers endlessly. However, it's important to know that only success stories, if you will, get reported in papers. And they don't they tell you how when things go well and you get data, how, what is the data? That's what they're presenting. How did they get it to you? You don't get the backstory of the 90% of the scientist's time that was spent chasing down something that didn't work. You don't get the um, you don't get the whole picture. You don't get the questions that aren't answered. It's like, here's a question, here's how I answered it. Now do something with this, go on. It's kind of a problem. I think in other fields like math, they put out there really clearly, like, these are the things we don't know yet. Somebody figure it out. In biology, we tend to just commit to writing only what we really are sure of. Like, here's the things I'm sure of. Now you can put in a paper. So if you only read papers, what I'm saying is you get a skewed sense because you don't know, you don't have the whole big picture. This is why I love talks. In a talk, people will give you the big picture. In fact, a good talk, they'll start with the big picture. They'll say, this is what the field is. This is why I'm asking this question. And then they'll dive into it. But you'll get the story of the 10 things that didn't work. You'll get the story of, you'll get the bigger story, like what other people are doing, what might be happening, etc. So if you're dipping your toe into science, the best place to learn, get info is actually through talks. They're going to be more interesting and they're going to be more relevant. And so go to conferences because that's where talks happen. There's also, you can read Scientific American. There's some, New York Times has really good science info. There's sources like that that distill what's happening quite nicely. Okay, but scientist to scientist, this is how we communicate. And at conferences, conference components. So like I said, talks I think are the best place to start because that's where you're going to get the full picture. It's going to be the most interesting. Now, it depends who's talking. There's a huge difference that's not correlative between being an amazing scientist and being an amazing speaker, and they have nothing to do with each other. There's a small subset of scientists who are really good at giving talks. The others, most of them, I've been to thousands of talks, most of them are adequate. Some are outright terrible. Some, even people in the field, don't know what they're talking about, barely. Most of them are adequate in that they give you a boring but competent talk that is fascinating and interesting if you're in the field. If you're not, you're kind of going, why is this, the same monotone all for an hour? Okay, so don't let their ability to, be a competent public speaker cloud your judgment about their science because it's totally two different things. I gotta say, science is one of the few fields, well, it's a field, and I like it, where people don't judge you if you have an accent, if you dress badly, or if you can't give a good public talk. Like, you can have a fantastic career. In fact, those things are really irrelevant to your ability to have a career in science. And if anything, if you have an accent, they think you're like, maybe you're super smart because you're over here and you have an accent. And if you're in this country, it kind of elevates you instead of counting against you. I know some really amazing scientists, tons of money. they still can't speak English barely from China after 20 years. It's like, well, anyway, never mind. Um, but they're so busy doing the science. They're like, why do I have to speak English to anybody? What else? Okay, so talks are a great source of info. Poster session. As I said, the author stands at the poster. They're really fun. You get a quick tour. You can, if you, I don't think there's poster sessions at this conference, but if you go to one with a poster session, they're doing them virtually now. You can say, I find it very useful to say, can you give me the quick tour? Because there's like, they'll give you, if you just say, can you tell me about your work, or it could give me a tour, people, it'll go on for like 30 minutes. And then at a conference, there's almost always vendors, and they used to physically have tables and do demos. Now they're trying to do that virtually. The part I miss in virtual conferences is you usually walk by the table and there's always some cool branded swag that you, sometimes really good stuff that you pick up at each table for free. I've seen them try to do that online, but it's lame. It's like, they're not they're not giving you an actual toy or a pen or a t-shirt or anything. Anyway, when we resume in person, keep your eye out. The swag will be even better. Okay, so conference etiquette. Here's a big thing. The main thing to know is when you're at a conference, a science conference, and you're in a talk, whether it's virtual or in person, you need to be completely silent. No chatting of any sort, no making noise of any sort. If you have a laptop, it's a thing now. People are typing into their laptops while they're at a talk, and annoys people. So at least be in the back. There's like a laptop session in the back where everybody can, make their keyboard typing noises, right? But absolutely no talking, no phones going off, nothing like that. The reason for that is that you might be sitting there completely bored and lost, and you're just thinking about other things, or you're surfing your phone. As long as you're not like holding it up like this, it's fine. No problems. But while you might not be following the talk, the person right next to you might be having the epiphany of their life. They might be going, oh my God, this changes everything. I know how to cure cancer. So, and I'm serious about that. Don't mess with that, okay? Like, take whatever that speaker is saying is very, very important to somebody in the audience, and hopefully a lot of people, and they're listening to every word and every detail. And so the rule is absolute silence, and that's really important. The other big rule, and I'm giving you the tools to go to this conference and other conferences and just be, like, don't do the right thing and how to do the wrong. Don't do the wrong thing and how to do the right thing is the thing. The other thing, at the end of every talk, there will always be, almost always, but usually about 5 minutes or more for questions. And they'll call it questions, but what they mean is, can people in the field please respond and discuss? And so don't get fooled. It's not like classes and questions where if I say, do you have any questions? I mean, ask me anything, ask me, tell me I wasn't clear. Did you miss some info? I'm glad to go over it again. It's not like that. They're not asking, they don't want you to say, I didn't understand the part about, they want people in the field to stand up and say, well, in my lab last week, or it's very, or, like, you should have done this, or what about this, or everything that's being said during that question session is very political. The people talking almost always know each other, or they're registering who reacts to what, who says what's going on. I've had students attend conferences and ask me why they were all angry with each other. And that was an interesting cultural response. So I'll say they're not angry. I've never, while it's political, I've never, maybe once or twice, have I ever seen things get sort of towards the mean end of things, but they're not being mean. They're just, scientists are very blunt. Um, that's basically it. They're very blunt. And so they don't, if you're used to a professional environment where everybody is really nice and takes 10 minutes to say some slightly tiny criticism, you know, it's, the science is not like that. We don't have that kind of time. Eh, they won't say things like that's BS directly in a talk, but I mean, in a question and answer, but they will to each other's face, you know. So if it sounds like they're saying, I don't believe you, that's bullshit, or excuse my language, or that's ridiculous, there's no way that could have happened, they're probably saying that. And it's okay, because that's how science works. Like, it's not personal, it's just we're all trying to figure out the truth together, and we're excited about figuring out the truth. Not that people aren't, that, you know, there isn't skullduggery and that people aren't mean to each other in science, but usually it's not during the questions period. And you'll see even people, like if somebody says, wow, that was really good, that's a big deal. That person just got a job if they're young. So anyway, that's it. The talk, maintain silence at all times. I used to tell people, well, so for back when we're in person again, don't leave or enter except during the questions or the break periods. So make absolutely no noise. Make sure, I guess, in a Zoom environment that you're on mute, and enjoy the talk. And a good talk starts with a general intro. The first slide will be the background, like what am I studying? Why am I studying it? And then the last slide will be the summary of what that person has presented. And then in between, they're going to go into details. And I think I said this last week too. Don't worry if you don't follow. Just immerse yourself in the jargon. Your brain's good at pattern recognition. Just enjoy the gist of it. Be surprised by the pretty images every so often. And just get a sense of what does a scientific talk look like? What are they, you know, what are they talking about? What are they presenting? It's fine if you don't follow it. Everybody in an audience, there's always a lot of people who are following it and it matters to them. And then there's just always a lot of people who are just sort of thinking about the next thing they're going to do, and tuning back in to the end. Oh my God. Speaking of which, don't let this happen. I'm going to have to like fix my, I'm going to have to disconnect. I'm writing myself a note, sorry. Speaking of, I'm going to make sure I disconnect my computer so this doesn't happen next week. Okay, when I'm attending the conference. All right, what else? What do you wear? So scientists mostly work in labs. And so it's kind of, like I said, this is a profession that doesn't judge you on your fashion sense or on your attire, except in the sense of if you're really dressed up or wearing a suit, they're like, you can't possibly be doing any work, or they know you're a salesperson. So most scientists I know are super proud that they don't own ties. At most, they'll wear a jacket if they're feeling really fancy. And for women, you know, basically student attire is fine, because there's a lot of grad students who can't afford anything besides a t-shirt and a pair of jeans. And there is a little bit like, once you're a professor, then you buy yourself a jacket, you know. So don't dress up too much, actually. And obviously dress, you know, honestly, what most of you come to class with or to go to work in is probably just fine. Networking. So networking with a scientist is really easy, even though a lot of them are introverts. They're passionate about science. So all you have to do is ask them what they're working on, and then sit back and listen, and they'll love you. Super easy. Again, it's not about the charm. It's not about the, you know, polite conversation. Everybody there wants to talk science. So if you're, you know, if you're shy or intimidated or whatever, don't worry about it. All you have to do is say, what are you working on right now? Sit back for a few hours. Okay. So I found myself often actually in situations where like I know somebody just gave a talk and I didn't go to it. For me, that's sort of I'm like, oh, I can't say anything. But then again, you just say one thing like, oh, such and such is really cool, or that other, this other talk was really cool. You just let a scientist talk. Notice how I can talk endlessly. Most scientists, although introverts, if asked about science, can talk endlessly. So here's some prompts for you when there's networking sessions at most conferences, even online. Ask them what's a big unsolved problem in the field. They'll love that. How they first got interested in science, whatever, get them talking about science and you're fine. Also, I put this in, say you're new to the field, to give it a positive spin. Like you don't have to say anything, you just get them talking, they'll never know. But if you want to, if it comes up, don't say, I don't understand this stuff. I'm telling you as 101 students, next year you'll know this. But since you're brand new, you've been in this class for a week, I haven't had time to teach you anything much at this point, or you haven't had time to learn anything much. It's complete. They know us though. They know about the merit microscopy program. Although this year, because it's online, there's a ton of new people, so who knows? It's completely fine to say, I don't understand that. I don't know. Well, let me phrase it. Say that you're new to the field rather than saying you don't understand it, because that's sort of putting you down, yourself down. Say the positive, you're new and learning. Okay, so always positive spin is good. All right. And then, well, not let me go. There we go. So here's some of the best conferences for microscopy and for your field. And yes, go now. Go now, even though you're brand new. Like I said, AIM, the folks, most of them know us and love us, and microscopists are oddly really nice among the scientists. um, the neurobiologists are stuck up, on the other hand. Oh, well. But they're still friendly when you ask them about science. They're still excited and nice. Um, so this is the conference we're all going to next week as part of your lab. Yeah, so why do I say go now? Even though you might not understand a lot of it, go now to explore careers, go now to look around, go now because science is for everybody, not just the people who've been doing it forever. Go now because they love meeting you, because usually you're wide-eyed and full of excitement. You're like, oh, really? Oh, this is happening? And honestly, what I've heard back from scientists when we've gone like with brand new students like you is you're kind of their favorite interaction at the conference because you're so new and they love it. We're novelty junkies. We were just talking in lab as scientists. So anything new is fun. So a person who doesn't know much and the scientist can be like, oh, let me tell you about this and that and that. You just made their day. So go because you'll enjoy it and they'll enjoy it. ASCB is American Society for Cell Bio. We usually go to this conference too when it comes to San Francisco. That's in December, so it's a while from now. But there's a lot of good images on their website if you're still doing your scavenger hunt. Neuro is the Society for Neuroscience, and it's a huge meeting, often in San Diego, but now I guess online. Neuro is one of the fields that uses imaging the most, and you'll see at the conference too. So neurobiology, studying neurons, a lot of the breakthroughs are coming through imaging. Cell biology is a study of cells and their functions, same thing. It's a field that is heavily dominated by imaging, by microscopy. SACNAS is an association that promotes diversity. So undergraduates doing research who are BIPOC students. It's a very friendly conference. A lot of you are going to be or are working in histotech labs. And so our California Histotech Society is so wonderful. They had a big part in starting this program. They want you to come now early in their career. They've many times told me, tell your students not to, they don't have to wait to have the job or to have the certification or anything. Tell them to come when they're early in the program, start to get to know us. We love them. They're thrilled that we exist because they all want to retire, or so they claim. I'm not sure they really will, but they're really aware that most of them are old. And so when they see somebody new, they almost young to them is 30s or 40s, by the way. Um, so when they see you, they're just thrilled. They're like, oh, the next generation finally has arrived. Um, it's basically there's only our program in California and the one down south that helped us get started with Jennifer. Oh, what's her last name? Anyway, she runs the CHS or is big in it. Um, and go. They're super friendly. And besides, you can find out about jobs. And the National Histotech Society also runs a really good conference. You're going to go to this for the rest of your life as a histotech, by the way. The California Histo Society, it's once a year, and you get your continuing ed credits through it. So, just get started now. You can alternately get your CE credits, continuing ed, through the National Histo Society, which also is wonderful. It's the whole country. It's way bigger. I like the CHS because it's the same few people and they're just so nice. But NSH is great because it's huge and there's lots of talks and it's just good. So go to both. And ASCP also runs a conference and you can get CE units. And ASCP is the organization that certifies you, so you'll belong to it. And again, start now. Start going to these conferences now and meet people and find out about their jobs, their lives, their work, how it is. And the San Francisco Microscopy Society will probably send you an email because the new president is a graduate of ours and she's phenomenal. And she's probably going to be a guest speaker, but she's also trying to renew this organization that's the oldest microscopy society in the Bay Area, maybe in the world, one of the oldest in the world. It's just been going on for more than a century, something like that. But it's another case of a lot of old people and them needing some youth. So, and she's ready to take it to the next level with you. All right, so these are all good conferences. Let's look at the one that's happening next week. That's going to be your lab assignment for next week. Your lab assignment is basically going to go to a talk and tell me about it as much as you can figure it out. So I wrote down for you, because I do this every year for everybody, some of the more interesting talks. I'm sort of like, I'm committing this to recording online. Oh my gosh, but oh well. So this is just, my picks, my recommendations. And actually, I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to share this instead. I'm going to share the actual conference, which I hope you have signed up for, and because they were threatening to start charging. So that's why I'm like, sign up before they start charging, even if it's $20. So the schedule is next Wednesday. It's all in the morning because most I don't know, a lot of the people are coming from Germany, where there's a lot of imaging. Germany and Japan, both. And so they figured out with the time schedules, this is what they had to do. Because you're like, why is it only in the morning? It used to run, when it runs regular, it runs from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. But anyway, this was a compromise between all the time zones. So there's Feather, that's her other job, is working at Berkeley with Holly, who started the imaging course, started this conference, is really phenomenal, microscopist, highly respected, etc. Helped start our program. And so Feather's her, I guess, her assistant, but kind of runs things as Feather tends to do. So there's these networking sessions really early every morning. I encourage you to go if you possibly can. And then the first session is always on FLIM, which is the people who sponsor the conference. And these folks, while FLIM is really cool, it's a great technique, it might be saving lives already. And Wolfgang's an awesome person. Like, he actually loves talking to students at these things. He's German. He's one of the main inventors of FLIM, runs the company, sponsors the conference. they give very, very dry talks, shall we say, very technical talks here. That's a way to put it. This session, it's gonna be amazing because I'm a cell biologist, so I'm like so excited. But also because the session actually is new. It's gonna tell stories. These are like a lot of sessions are like the math about how the microscope works. This is gonna tell you the story about the disease and the cells, and there's gonna be movies, and it's gonna be beautiful. So this is, I highly recommend this session. These will be recorded if you can't go at that time. And Sam Lewis is amazing. Some of you were in Biosci 30 and met her. She's an extraordinary professor who images mitochondria. And she's also, among her many, many amazing reasons I love her, because her science is incredible, but she's also the first Black professor at in my old department, molecular and cell bio, which is the biggest, one of the biggest, most prestigious departments at UC Berkeley. She's the first Black scientist. She was just hired last year. I mean, that's insane. This thing, the department's been on for like 50 years. So she has like, she's broken through a lot of barriers because her science is just undeniable. And she happens to also be a nice person. So I'm a huge fan and her talk will be great. And it's a start towards making, you know, these institutions like Berkeley are wonderfully good at science and terrible at science at the same time, because if you don't have diversity, you're terrible at science. Okay, so then the next day, is this the next day? No, this is still in the morning. Good Lord. There will be tutorials. Those are great. Those are, if you don't know anything, go to those. Okay, then the next day we have networking and cafe. Okay, clinical imaging, also recommended. Don't know these people, but clinical imaging is where they're taking these techniques and diagnosing diseases with them. So I think this is where, in case you're wondering, you're like, I want to be a histotech. Why are you sending me to a microscopy conference? Well, first of all, because the world's big and you never know where you're going to end up. But second, because these kind of techniques that people are developing, and especially fluorescence microscopy, has already entered histo and diagnoses and it's the tip of the iceberg where it's entered now. This is the future of your field, is fluorescence imaging. And so when we started this program, we asked all the histos, we went to these conferences, the Histotech conference, we asked our advisory board, and they were all like, look, our students need to know genomics and they need to know fluorescence because all the working histotechs are being forced to do it and have no clue. And so that's why. And let me check on the audio for a second. Okay, that stopped. High content imaging. This person's a good speaker. This might be a lot of technical stuff. Okay. Slim Threat and Beyond. I'm being a lot of, okay. This speaker in particular, oh my God. He does amazing work. And if you want to see it, I'm being mean, but no, this is just truthful. He's not a good speaker. If you want to see what I'm talking about, amazing scientist, hard to follow his talk. Stephen Vogel, on the other hand, another one, if you network, he works at NIH and he occasionally gives the most brilliant talk you've ever listened to. And other years he's technical. So I don't know, but he might be really good. Might be a year where sometimes he brings in art and memory. He studies memory, how memories are made. So it depends on his mood, whether it's a talk that's sort of accessible to everybody or super technical, but he's very entertaining. Another expo. This is us. This is Toby. Well, this is Feather. This is Toby. He's a graduate of the program. So come to support us and hear about this. But I'm like, you know, you're living it. So this is more, this session is about getting the vendors and the people with money and jobs to start paying for you, basically. What else? So then the next day, the third day, correlative EM. So Gokul is, so Eric Betzig is a scientist who, I think I have it on my slide that I'll return to. He's a scientist who recently won the Nobel Prize for his innovations. And he knows about us. He's kind of busy after he won the Nobel. I'll tell you more about the story of what he did because it's really interesting later in the class. But he was, where was he? Well, he's at Genelia Farms, which is out in near DC, and it's this amazing place you'll hear about too. They have a ton of money. That he kind of is the king of that place. And then somehow UC Berkeley managed to get him to come to Berkeley. He works at both places because he can. When you win a Nobel, you can do anything you want. And the reason, and so I'm telling you about him because Gokul, the first speaker, is actually the guy who does the stuff in the lab right now. Gokul and Eric both do they do all the science together. So this talk is probably going to be really good. And then Jennifer Lippincott Schwartz. That's why I can't remember the other Jennifer because she's in my mind right now. But she is an amazing scientist, and it's her first time talking. She's like super high level, should have won the Nobel, might still. And so we're all very excited. So come to this talk because it's going to be good. And she speaks in an understandable fashion. In fact, she just made a whole bunch of microscopy videos. So this tends to be a pretty dry session, but it has some pretty interesting speakers. So I give it a recommendation too. Neurosci, go because I know in the intro, Lavi said you love the brain. Here it is. Here's imaging the brain. You will learn a lot out of these speakers. I think she's quite good. Naji is going to be really good. She is the reason, actually. She's married. So she's the reason Eric moved to Berkeley and why we suddenly have this wealth of imaging in the Bay Area expertise. Because here's a little insider knowledge that isn't, it's not hidden, but it's not like written anywhere either. Holly introduced Naji to Eric Betzig when Naji was still at Berkeley, and then they got married, and I think they have a kid, I can't remember, but they got married, and she's the one who, she said, like, I want to live back in Berkeley. So he said, well, okay, fine. So, you know, all this science, it's very human in the end, right? It's about somebody, it's about where does your spouse want to live, where you end up doing your work. Okay, that's my little recap. And then I'm going to go back to the last slide. Share screen. Let's see. Okay, so there again, you see my recommendations for speakers that I think will be particularly interesting. I put our session in parentheses because the speakers are phenomenal, but you won't learn new science. And so in terms of your assignment, you got to do one of the science things, but come to our session, of course. Here I put a few buzzwords for you that you're going to hear flying around the conference. And I sort of just went, what talk this year? What might you hear about? I'm going to let you read this. I'm glad to explain it. This is for people who are like, I want to be prepared. So there's me talking about Eric Betzig, et cetera. This is stuff you're going to learn this semester. By the end of the semester, you'll be like, oh, I know all this stuff. Are you kidding me? It's a little weird to introduce it to you the first week, but depends on your personality, right? So if you want to feel a little like I know more, I'm going to go in fully armed, read about this, ask me about it, etc. Okay, so that is it. The main thing is go to the conference, enjoy it, and network, talk to people, and have fun at it.